Let's face it, even the best actors give a bad performance every now and then. Whether the result of subpar writing, misguided casting, or just a little good old-fashioned phoning it in, these are some of the worst performances on Netflix's original shows. After delivering a handful of solid additions to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with small-screen adaptations of Daredevil, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage, Netflix looked to go 4 for 4 with the introduction of the ass-kicking kung fu zen master known as Iron Fist. What they got, however, was an absolute snoozer of a series that, short of a few killer action pieces, pretty much failed on every front.
This is probably gonna hurt.
Pacing was a big part of the problem with Iron Fist, and it was compounded by the absence of a star with enough charm or charisma to carry the show through its slower sections. Through its first 13 painfully slow episodes, lead Finn Jones delivered an agonizingly stilted performance that wavered between twitchy, childish outbursts and super serious mugging. Considering this is supposed to be a character who is completely out of touch with the modern world, you can't help but feel like it might have worked in someone else's hands. Sadly, Jones just didn't bring quite enough depth or humanity to the character to do that. The character never feels like the emotionally conflicted hero he should be. Instead, he comes across as a spoiled brat with superpowers. Throughout his inaugural run, the immortal Iron Fist is basically the only hero in the MCU that you don't want to root for. Netflix looked like they'd pulled off a casting coup when they announced they had greenlit Gypsy, a psychological, sensual, dramatic series starring Naomi Watts and Billy Crudup. Unfortunately, critics were scathing in their reviews of the show, which wastes not only an intriguing setup, but also the talents of its highly accomplished cast. Most notably, Gypsy found the usually reliable Naomi Watts whiffing in the starring role. That's a real shame, too, since Watts' character is supposed to be driven by the exact same kind of spirited intellect, effortless magnetism, and internalized conflict that served some of her finest performances. To her credit, Watts does manage to bring elements of those attributes to her role in Gypsy, but she never quite finds the right level of balance between them. In the end, none of the character's struggles ring true, and Watts' increasingly melodramatic performance prevents the viewer from really connecting with the character, or the series as a whole. After his scene-stealing supporting turns on hit live-action comedies including Arrested Development and 30 Rock, it seemed only a matter of time before Will Arnett found a starring role to match his talents. And then Netflix announced Flaked, Arnett and Mark Chappelle's comedy about a recovering alcoholic and self-help guru struggling to keep his life together. Finally, it looked like he'd found a vehicle worthy of his gifts. Unfortunately, Flaked instead finds Arnett shamelessly mugging, overplaying punchlines, and undermining the story's dramatic turns. What's so confounding about Arnett's work on the show is that it's built around exactly the character type that served the actor so well over the years, in shows such as BoJack Horseman. Here, however, the in-your-face nature of Arnett's shtick never feels like anything more than that. It's a shame, too, since Flaked might have been an intriguing dark comedy in the hands of a stronger lead performer. As it stands, the show is all but unwatchable. Colleen Ballinger's Haters Back Off tells the comedic tale of a talentless wannabe who stumbles backwards into something resembling fame and infamy. Imagine a Pee Wee Herman movie without the playfulness or Napoleon Dynamite without the heart, and you're in the ballpark of Haters' general vibe, which is just as grating as it sounds. Ballinger's wildly over-the-top performance doesn't exactly help things either. Yes, Ballinger is intentionally playing over the top with Haters Back Off, but let's be honest, just because an actor makes a deliberate choice doesn't mean that choice necessarily works. Ballinger's antics may play well for her popular YouTube persona, but they're way too much to handle in a 30-minute episode. The show is occasionally funny and has some interesting insight on the nature of fame lust, but her one-note act is seemingly unbearable and undoes basically all of the show's good intentions.
Watch this.
Ever wonder what the world looks like through the eyes of Rob Schneider? Probably not, but that didn't stop Netflix from greenlighting a Schneider-led Curb Your Enthusiasm knockoff anyway. Rather than delivering an insightful, self-effacing portrait of himself, however, Schneider's real Rob instead plays as a shamelessly self-indulgent hodgepodge of ideas that worked better on other, much funnier shows. It also proves that Schneider's comedic stylings are more than a little outdated. It's worth noting that Schneider was never much of an actor to begin with. If you've seen him in lowbrow fare like Deuce Bigalow or The Animal, then you already knew that. But Schneider's hacky hamming on Real Rob is a new low, even for him. The only thing less funny than Schneider's performance, however, is a stand-up act, which is unhelpfully interspersed throughout the show. Honestly, the most astonishing thing about his work on Real Rob is that Netflix actually let him do it for 2 full seasons. Britt Robertson, who you may have seen in Tomorrowland or The Space Between Us, is a hugely talented up-and-coming actor, and she'll almost certainly be a big star in the very near future. But her portrayal of self-made millionaire Sophia Amoruso on Girl Boss was the most wildly off-kilter element of a show, all but consumed by wildly off-kilter elements. To be fair, Robertson feels like the victim of bad casting and poor writing more than anything else. Still, a more seasoned performer might have found a way to balance out the writing's warts-and-all approach to the character with some sort of humanizing humility, and Robertson just wasn't up to the task. The acerbic coarseness she brought to Girl Boss's more biting moments feels a bit too harsh, and the quieter, humanizing moments come across as soulless plot contrivances. What makes it so difficult to watch is that you can genuinely see Robertson working. You can see how hard she's trying to look funky and cool, how hard she's trying to be tough and mean, and how desperately she wants to appear soulful. Unfortunately, if you can see an actor acting, that means they aren't doing it very well. Based on Jay Asher's best-selling book of the same name, 13 Reasons Why arrived on Netflix with a touch of controversy and a wave of critical praise. Brought to life by a terrific young cast and a stable of talented filmmakers, the first season was more or less self-contained. So much so, in fact, that nobody really asked for a second season. Still, Netflix went ahead and renewed the show anyway, only to watch it slide right down to the opposite end of the critical spectrum. Throughout 13 Reasons Why's woeful second season, the problem areas that were tolerable in Season 1 were thrown into sharp relief. Most notable of all was the performance of Miles Heiser, whose frustratingly deadpan emo affectations from the opening season turned downright emotionally vacant in the second run.
Yeah, no, I know. I get it. It's probably stupid anyway.
Here, Heiser struggles through dramatic scenes, fumbles awkwardly through lighter scenes, and generally drains the show of emotional energy. It's clear this isn't all an acting problem, since Heiser has delivered solid performances in indie fare such as Rudderless and The Stanford Prison Experiment. The show's third season, unfortunately, didn't fare much better with critics. Altered Carbon might actually be one of the better science fiction shows that Netflix has produced. Joel Kinnaman is also a highly intriguing actor, fully capable of bringing calculating depth and a suave sense of cool to just the right role. Unfortunately, Kinnaman's work as the re-sleeved Takeshi Kovacs in the first season of Altered Carbon saw the actor bringing little more to the mix than brute physical force. Now that sense of physicality is genuinely quite an impressive part of Kinnaman's run on Altered Carbon. In fact, watching him throw down against the bad guys in that first season was actually a big part of what made this show so much fun to watch. The problem is that bone-breaking fights and eye-popping set pieces only account for half of the picture in Altered Carbon. The other half is broken into a blend of future noir brooding and deep-rooted emotional turmoil, both of which fuel the fires of Takeshi Kovacs' every move. Unfortunately, when it comes to conveying the calculated cool of a private eye, or the fractured emotional state of a character out of time, Kovacs feels like an empty husk of a man, and nothing more. Historically speaking, pop stars have a spotty record when attempting to make the jump from the sound studio to the cinema, with everyone from Madonna to Janet Jackson failing to find success in their cinematic endeavors. And when R&B icon Mary J. Blige threw her hat into the big screen ring, people weren't expecting much. Blige spent the better part of the 2000s delivering memorable, if slight supporting turns over a range of film and television projects. In 2017, however, she left the jaws of movie fans firmly on the floor with a scene-stealing, Oscar-nominated turn in Netflix's racially charged post-war drama Mudbound. After Mudbound, the world believed they were witnessing the unexpected transformation of a pop star into a serious screen talent. Of course, casting is often the most important factor in the making of a great performance. And while Mudbound was a pretty great example of perfect casting, Blige's role in the Netflix superhero series The Umbrella Academy is basically the exact opposite. Of course, you can't really blame Blige for dodgy casting, and the script isn't great either. But there's not much more to it than that. Any way you cut it, Blige's performance as the time-traveling assassin Cha-Cha just didn't bring much to the mix. Although fans mostly love Hayley Atwell for her pitch-perfect work as Peggy Carter in the MCU, she's great in pretty much every role she's ever played. Every role, that is, except the one she took in Black Mirror. If you happen to miss Hayley Atwell on the series, she turned up in the second season episode titled Be Right Back, which, we should note, originally aired on Channel 4 in the UK before the show became a Netflix original series. In the episode, Atwell plays a young woman whose lover is tragically killed in a car crash. This being Black Mirror, of course, it's possible to keep in touch with the recently deceased and even recreate their physical bodies. Conceptually speaking, Be Right Back is vintage Black Mirror terrain, but the episode never quite comes together, largely due to an uncharacteristically bland performance from Atwell. Of course, that may or may not be the result of her sharing the screen with the character that's actually supposed to be totally devoid of actual human emotion. Not even a decade has passed since Netflix changed the face of the streaming industry by producing its own films and shows. And while it's had its fair share of runaway hits, Netflix has had just as many failures too, if not more. That was especially true in the early days, when Netflix was still trying to figure out what did and didn't work on the platform. And in those early days, a few Netflix shows worked less than the supernatural drama Hemlock Grove. Set in a small Pennsylvania town, the series followed a pair of nefarious doctors and a couple of mystery-solving youngsters, who also happened to be werewolves. Although the show suffered from many problems, chief among all was the underwhelming writing and the wildly disparate performances delivered by the leading cast. Truth be told, few among them were any good in the series, but poor, not yet Pennywise Bill Skarsgård seemed utterly and perpetually lost amid all the Hemlock Grove silliness. Luckily, it seems the world has already forgotten he was ever in this series. Here's hoping he has as well. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Nicki Swift videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.